Hello friends, I have something exciting and new for you today. Leica has just announced the Q2 Monochrome. I was able to use it for a week, and today I can share with you my thoughts and my photos, and even some videos that I captured with the camera. If you love black and white photography, you're going to love this. But first, what is it? And isn't there already a Q2? Yes, there is. I own it. But this Q2 Monochrome joins the family of Leica Monochrome cameras, which are, you can probably guess, monochrome only. That's right, there is no color at all, ever. Leica started this unique family of cameras in 2012 with the Leica M monochrome, and then there have been a couple of other M monochrome cameras since, most recently the M10 monochrome earlier this year. But this is the first non-M monochrome camera. This is the Q2 platform, which means that it is also the first in the monochrome family to have autofocus and an electronic viewfinder. That makes it highly usable while maintaining the simplicity of capturing the world around you in monochrome. Before we get into the details and specifications, I will tell you that this is a quick and quiet camera that flies under the radar. You can achieve phenomenal monochrome results, and the experience is also a joy. There is a simplicity to this camera that is undeniably Leica, and for me, an absolute wonder. There is quite literally nothing like it on the market today. This camera fits in a niche within a niche. It won't be for everyone, certainly, but if it does pique your interest, you won't be disappointed if you get one into your hands. While a certain part of the Leica market might be considered collectors, I see the Q2 Monochrome as a shooter's camera. A shooter who may have been shooting black and white film for decades and perhaps still does. Someone who won't come home and say, "Oh, I wish I had those images in color." Someone who's at peace, leaving home with an amazing, almost invisible camera in their hands and shooting black and white images with no intent to shoot color and no willingness to see black and white shooting as any sort of compromise. The Leica Q2 Monochrome is undeniably a sibling of the Leica Q2. In case you aren't familiar with the Q2, the fixed lens, fixed focal length, full frame beauty, I do have a review of the Q2, which I will link to in the description. And because I am familiar with the Q2 and the more recent Leica cameras, I was able to pick the Q2 Monochrome up and start using it right away. There was no get to know you period. Leica has done an excellent job of moving their cameras toward a unified control scheme, and the terminology and menu structure are all very similar. If you speak Leica, you can pick up this camera and use it with ease. The Q2 Monochrome has a new full-frame 47 megapixel sensor. Leica didn't simply remove the color filter from the Q2 sensor and call it a day. That is not their style. Because the camera is monochrome only, sharpness and detail are the words of the day. There's no bare filter here needed, no color interpolation in software, no color at all. One side effect of this design is that they were able to extend the ISO range up to 100,000. And if you're familiar with Leica, you know that that isn't just a number. Leica does not have specifications on their cameras that they don't fully stand behind as highly functional and usable. They are purposeful, perhaps even understated, as Leica never seems to include specifications for their own sake. When they include a capability, it's exactly that. It's to make you capable, not just to look good in a comparison table, which can lead other brands to incorporate me too specifications and functions that don't seem to fit into any particular design language or use case. With the very high and usable ISO capability, I noticed that I was keeping my camera out for longer, like when I was out in the desert after sunset, because I was still getting good results. That f1.7 lens helps a lot here too. More on that lens in a moment. There is a 13-stop dynamic range. Can a black and white image be vibrant? I think so. And that's a capability that Leica has given us with the Q2 Monochrome, taking advantage of that dynamic range. Although this camera truly is creating monochrome images, there are also 3 toning options in camera for when you're recording your images in JPEG: sepia, blue, and selenium. And you have weak and strong options for each. I made frequent use of these toning options. Honestly, I could use my Q2 with the natural or high contrast monochrome film styles, either in RAW or JPEG, and then create a filter in Lightroom to quickly apply across the board, like the selenium or the blue, which were my favorite. But one of the reasons that I like to shoot monochrome in camera is to get my finished result in camera and not tinker with it later in post-processing. Getting my image in the camera, my final one, is a very big deal to me. And these toning options allowed me to do that, but to also vary how I captured my monochrome images. Incidentally, Leica brand color lens filters similar to this one will also be available for this camera in yellow, orange, and green. The Q2 monochrome has the same lens affixed as the Q2. It is a wonderful lens. It is a 28mm f1.7 Summilux lens. The lens is permanently affixed to the camera, so by definition, it has to be a workhorse. It has macro capability. And even though you are at a fixed focal length here, just like with the Q2, you have the option of digital zoom. It's a mindful digital zoom. Exactly 3 options in addition to the native 28mm field of view. Think of them as a small bag of primes right inside the camera. They are 35mm, 50mm, and 75mm equivalent crops. And because the camera has a 47 megapixel sensor, you can use them with little concern with image degradation. Even at 75mm, you retain 7 megapixels, which I've never found lacking. Leica images seem so smooth and well-defined that they don't seem to suffer when cropped. I programmed a button on the body of the camera to be my digital zoom, or digital primes button, let's call it. With each press, I move through the options, which allows me to visualize my finished product. As a side note, when you shoot in JPEG, that zoom is baked into the file, but when you shoot in RAW, while the image is tagged with the zoom, you are able to undo it in post-processing. You have access to the full sensor file, as though you had captured the image at 28mm. All of those points speak to the usability of the camera. In nearly all of my camera reviews, I say, if I don't like using the camera or I find it difficult to use, I won't use it, no matter the results. So a few more things about the usability of the Q2 monochrome. The ergonomics of the camera are going to be a personal preference, of course, but I love using it. I love using my Q2. Now, Raymond, on the other hand, has purchased the Leica accessory grip for our Q2 so that he can hold on to it better when walking around with it. You can see that while there is an indentation for your thumb on the back of the camera, there is no integrated grip on the front. For me, when I pick up the Q2 with that grip on it, it's coming right off. I don't feel the need to use it at all, but one thing that we embrace here is shoot as you wish, and I don't give Raymond too hard a time for preferring the accessory grip. The Q2 monochrome is IP52 dust and spray water protected. I love this. I've had my Q2, which also is IP52, out in all kinds of weather, and I even had this Q2 monochrome out in a bit of rain. I didn't have to think twice about it. Talking about battery life, the SEPA rating for still shots is 370 images per charge, but that number completely depends on what you're doing. I took it out for several outings where I was playing around in the menus and reviewing images on the back of the camera, all of which eats up battery life. And I didn't find the battery lacking. This camera does not, however, charge via USB-C, so when I do take my Q2 out for an all-day hike or outing, I do bring a second battery. The camera itself is very quiet and very quick. The autofocus, though contrast detect only, is quick and accurate, and even the startup of the camera is quick. Overall, the Q2 monochrome, like the Q2, doesn't get in the way of your photography. Rather, it gets out of the way so I can create my art. It delivers stunning black and white image quality, provided you bring the timing, light, and location. It's a tool, mindfully designed with minimal interference between you and the image. This is the appeal of the Q2. Then taken a step further into black and white with the Q2 Monochrome. The camera body itself is art. It is beautiful and minimal. It is almost exactly like the Q2, the same buttons and dials, the same lens, but the leatherette on the body is a different texture and it lacks color. There's no Leica red dot. The numbers and labels on the lens are all monochrome. It's simple and it doesn't attract attention. It's almost invisible. So, what did this camera do for me? Let me address this question in two ways. One, I've not been shy about my feelings about Leica cameras. They are the cameras that I generally use when I want to enjoy myself. They're guaranteed to refresh me when my creativity is waning, which is why we've purchased the Q2 and the SL2 to sit among the rest of our family of cameras back there. This was no different. And two, what did shooting exclusively in black and white do for me? I'm no stranger to switching any of my cameras over to monochrome. I love it. Shooting in black and white, especially when that is what I'm seeing through the viewfinder, leads me to different compositions. I'm looking at textures in a new way. I literally and figuratively see the world in a different way, and my photography reflects that. I own a Q2, but I'm obviously enthusiastic about the Q2 Monochrome. Do I want it as well? Yes. Do I need the Q2 Monochrome? No. But I want it. It's a beautiful camera that produces beautiful images, and I'm shooting in monochrome. So who knows if it'll eventually end up on my shelf, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? If you've made it this far in the video, I assume that you like black and white photography and that this camera is intriguing to you. Might it end up on your shelf? Let me know in the comments. I suspect that there will be many of you that ask if I would prefer the Q2 or the Q2 Monochrome. And that is a very difficult question that I don't have a good answer to. I'd be happy with either, but I'd be happier with both. In the description of this video, you will find a link to my Q2 review, as well as a link to find out more about this new variant. On your way down to those links and those comments, give this video a like if you found it helpful or entertaining, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you to Leica for allowing me to use the Q2 Monochrome, and thank you to you for watching.